Good morning, everyone. My name is Tyler Hughes, and I am Vice Chair of the City of San Diego Commission for Arts and Culture, as well as Chair of Policy and Funding. We're going to do a quick roll call to confirm commissioner attendance. When I call your name, please say present. Commissioner Dr. Albert Lita, Commissioner Tracy Vincenzo is on this morning. Commissioner Kamal Martin, Commissioner Leanne, Commissioner Ann Bossler. Thank you all for your attendance. It has been noted. Also joining us today is city staff, including Executive Director Jonathan Plus, Chief of Civic Strategies Christine Jones, Senior Arts and Cultural Funding Manager Kim Eischen, and Cultural Funding Manager Gabrielle Bromberger, and Bel Reza has departed. Not from this earth, but just in the room. All right. So I'm going to kick on with non-agenda public comment. We are going to, the public has been invited to submit public comment on agenda and non-agenda items via a web form accessible through the agenda and the commission's website. Members of the public may also join in the meeting in person or as a webinar attendee. If members of the public have submitted comments in writing via the web form, staff will please read aloud the public comments submitted per city public comment protocol. I'm going to ask Kim to read aloud any non-agenda public comment or to call in any attendees who would like to provide a comment.
So I don't have any pre-submitted non-agenda public comment, but to those members of the public in attendance, please raise your hand if you would like to comment, and I'll make you speak and send you a prompt to mute yourself in order. I don't see any members of the public present.
Thank you, Kim. All right, moving right along, we're going to jump to the chair's report. Commission business. The first one is action item. This is our meeting minutes for January 13, 2023. I hope everyone had an opportunity to review the minutes from the January meeting. Would anyone like to make a motion to approve the minutes as they are? Good, please say now. Commissioner Bossler has put in the first. Do you have a second? Thank you, Commissioner Kim.
Point of order, am I or am I
very good point. You are ex officio. We're not voting member of this part of the body. So
I'll move.
Commissioner Kim has made the first, and thank you, Dr. Polito. So are there any public comments with a first and second?
No public comments and no members of the public comments.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Any comment from this? Great. Thank you. We'll now take a vote. I will call your name and please say yay, nay, or abstain. Remember, you do not need to have been in attendance to vote. Commissioner Albert, Dr. Albert Lita.
Yes, yay.
Thank you. Commissioner Vincenzo is not here. Commissioner Martin. Thank you. Commissioner Kim.
Yay.
And my vote is also a yay. Thank you. Thanks. So now we're going to get to the fun part. Fiscal year 2024 Organizational Support Program and Creative Community San Diego proposal ranks. So we are going to review these. I'm going to ask Kim to take over and present on this year's panels and rankings.
All right, good morning, everyone. We are recommending that the City of San Diego Commission for Arts and Culture recommend to the City of San Diego Mayor and City Council proposal ranks for fiscal 2024. We're recommending that the proposal ranks for the Organizational Support Program as submitted by the Commission Advisory Panel move forward, as well as recommending the proposal ranks for Creative Community San Diego as submitted by the Commission Advisory Panel as well. Just a little bit of background on this today. The City of San Diego issued the Part 1 application for fiscal year 2024 OSP and CPSP funding categories on September 2022. 201 nonprofit organizations submitted an application in response to the Part 1 application. Of those applicants, approximately 195 applicants with an agreement with the city for fiscal year 2023 were able to select between submitting a part two application and requesting the option to renew their agreement. The value to the existing OSP or CCSP agreement holder in submitting a part two application is that during this, the organization can update or refine organizational details, such as their program details or compete for a higher score in the past, if they want to try and improve the score or what they would have otherwise been. In total, 93 eligible proposals were submitted in response to the part two, and 95 applicants were granted an option to renew. Organizations who were granted the option to renew retained their ratified rank from the year in which they received it. In January 2023, the commission recommended panelists for commission advisory panels to participate in the review of the part two application proposals received by the city for OSP and CCSP this year. Over a 2-week period, the panels convened in 10 separate public meetings. Each panel evaluated a specific group of proposals kind of curated to align with their mission and funding goals. And after evaluation of all proposals and scoring, each panel voted to recommend ranks for their specific group. The lists included with this report show all the qualified applicants, including the recommended ranks provided by the fiscal year 2024 panels, and also by applicants who were granted the option to renew. The renewals have an asterisk next to them in the appendix of the report. As stated in the guidelines, any organization who received a rank of 2+ or below will be deemed not aligned with scoring criteria and will not be recommended to receive an award. No one in the panel process got that score or below this year. There's an appeal process, but that wasn't relevant, as mentioned, because everyone cleared the threshold this year. But the next step is following this committee's recommendation today, the commission would then receive and vote to recommend these ranks of the full body to the mayor and city council. Staff would then use those recommended ranks as one factor in the board calculation for the FY24 CCSP and OSP programs, and will be adopted into the city budget. So again, we are recommending here to recommend proposal rates for OSP this year and recommend proposal rates for
so we'll need a first and second before we can jump into discussion. So I'll entertain a motion to approve the ranks. Commissioner Martin, any second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Commissioner Kim. All right, so now we can hop into discussion. Any questions? Issues?
Can I just clarify here, you said that there were 93 proposals after part two, which are actual applications, and then 95 different applications, applicants opted not to submit a proposal and just to renew their rank.
That's right.
Okay, so then that's 188. So there were maybe 7 or 8 organizations that did not end up moving forward and submitting a proposal. Okay. Do we know usually why that drop off?
Anecdotally, I can just say that this year, some organizations backed out. Some organizations, when they're deciding to apply for DOT funding, have to decide between economic development dollars and our funding programs dollars. So some people make a decision that falls in another category for us. There are also some that just don't complete the application for reasons that we don't know. I mean, staff does try to actively reach out and alert about deadlines, and we're definitely very communicative in that regard. But there are some people who just don't clear the threshold, don't complete the application, or decide to withdraw.
Well, it's also very interesting that nobody fell underneath that threshold, the 2+. Do you think that's as a result of more access to information and help? Or was there something that changed in the application process that made it easier for organizations to at least meet that threshold?
I don't think so. I mean, I think the clearing that threshold is variable to our panels. So our panels do change every year. Without going so deep into that, some of our panelists, about half and half, we had about half new panelists, half panelists from last year. They deliberate as a body, they share their scores with the body. And yeah, no one was not recommended for funding. We do let them know at the end, as we've gone through all the panels, here are all the scores that stack up. Here are the thresholds for funding, but really just anecdotally, I'm not know it's really even close to being impressive.
Interesting, thank you.
Thank you for asking that, Commissioner Kim. I have done that too, and 7
Yeah.
If of those 7 organizations, I just wonder if it's worth us reaching out for the next funding cycle and just clarifying with them, hey, did you go for other dollars, or did you just not complete because of X, Y, or Z?
Yeah.
Just so we can have some lessons learned.
Yeah.
That's a great rate of getting people through the door.
Yeah, absolutely. We can do that. We also include those applicants on our reach out for the next fiscal year cycle. So they receive notifications about technical assistance opportunities. They would receive notifications about when the next application is open. We're also, running this capacity building series with RISE. So people on our mailing list would also receive updates about this. Most of these applicants I've actually been in touch with, and they've kind of just let me know, we're not going to move forward, or we didn't have time to complete. So, but we can reach out and get people as funding as well.
And maybe it's just, sending a specific invite for RISE for that capacity building to those 7, just saying, hey, this would be a good way for you to up your game for the next time, just so you can complete the application.
Yeah.
But, without adding a ton of extra work on your already very full plate. That's great. Just as a side question, of the rankings, and the panels were incredible this year. I just looking at those panels themselves, how you ran them, and the quality of the attendees was so high. Thank you for putting together just wonderful groups. Would you say that any of the panels found an application or applications that they would say, this is the par excellence? This is for other organizations that are going to learn how to do this 100% right.
Yeah.
These are the ones.
There were maybe, I think, 2 or 3 out of 4. And so that would kind of be reflective of like, that's the best score you can get. And to get a 4, everyone has to assign the highest maximum score. So everyone has to give them basically to get a 4. And there were a few that got those. I'm just trying to scroll through to see if
I can tell you, Pacific Arts Movement, being one of them,
Yeah.
in no way related to the legacy provided by Commissioner Kim. Art of a Lawn and Guitars in the Classroom, I see as well. So it's nice to see that there's also levels of organization, from very small to much larger, that are proving to be best of breed, as it were.
We also had some new applicants get a top score, like the High Steppers drill team. That was a new applicant. So to your point, it's kind of mixed.
Great. That's very exciting to hear. Any other questions, comments from?
Where's the High Steppers? Are they part of another group?
No, they're in CCSD.
Yeah. Literally page.
It's under the High Steppers.
Oh, the High Steppers. Oh. We could change that.
Yeah,
Just from marketing standpoint, just saying.
yeah, we got 3 right there. The Bonton Society, Group Family Foundation, and the High Steppers. I think anyway,
I know.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for all your hard work, Kip. Your panels were really something, and very much appreciate all the work you and the whole commission team did to make those such a fantastic success and really deep dive opportunity.
Yeah,
and I want to thank you for, your introductions in each one and, for being so part of it. That was fantastic. So thank you all for all of this. And, I think we can call for a vote. So.
We did.
Come with the public comment. Thank you very much.
We didn't have public comment already, but.
So that's, thank you. Thank you for catching me on that. All right, let's move to a vote. I will call your name and please respond with a yay, nay, or abstain. Right, Commissioner Dr. Allen. So, yay. Commissioner Sedendo is not here. Commissioner Martin. Yay. You, Commissioner Kim.
Yay.
Thank you. And my vote is also yay. Motion carries. We'll bring that forward to the full commission at the next meeting. Moving right along, over to staff report. I'm gonna turn things over to our fearless leader, Executive Director Jonathan Gloss, to share staff reports with us and an update on the TEI assessment recommendation.
Great, thank you. All right, appreciate it. So I'm gonna move things around here, given the fact that we have some hot news off the press this morning. Before I get into that, however, I do want to step back from the panel process for just a minute. Those of you who had the opportunity to call in or attend any of the meetings, I think you'll agree that the panel process can be very, very, very smart. I want to thank Gabrielle and Kip for managing the panels. I think all of you know that panels are complex, and prepping the panelists in advance is one of the most important things. And it truly is one of the smoothest years that we've had since I've been here. So kudos to both of you. The other thing that I just want to mention is that on the May or June agenda, we'll have a debrief with you on the panelists themselves, in anticipation of putting the call out to panelists for next year. We haven't really struggled this year. It's hard every year, but this year we have really struggled to get the level of expertise that we needed, while also diversified with panelists. And we know that there's particular industries where it's very hard. Luckily this year we were able to attract some panelists from Natural History Museum in San Francisco, using science industry in Chicago, and there was something else. That was our foray into actually having some senior level folks that work in natural history and science museum spaces. But we're going to have to continue to really dig in locally, but also nationally, in particular in classical music spaces. The band spaces surprisingly is hard, and these museums that are more focused on natural history and science to get the level of expertise we need, but also the diversity of the panels to share what we run at the minute. So the guys on the table, around the table, we show up with a little bit of light. So that's something that I want to really dig into. Exactly. So my intention is that now we really have to struggle with this. So we'll bring that back. We'll bring that back to you formally in the next month or two. But I'm going to ask all of you to work with us over that 6-month period. Really use our networks nationally to get the right results.
Jonathan, on that note, does the commission pay for travel and expenses, any kind of expenses? That's what the NEA does. That's how they're able to attract people to fly in. Are we expecting these panelists to
we're continuing to do it.
You're continuing to do it virtually, okay,
Yeah, and then obviously there's the went on this year.
okay. What was the per diem?
300.
300.
For half day.
Double what it was last year.
It's a lot more than when I was.
Yeah, I was gonna ask.
Yeah. And a pat on the back.
You have to put on the commission, adding more work to your file.
It's, is the per diem in line with other cities? I'm curious what other cities offer for their per diem.
We ran the numbers last year, and that's why we raised it. We're still not top of the class by any means.
Where do we need to be at top of class?
New York was like 500.
Okay,
For the most part, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
It feels a little. empty.
Stuff like Groupon.
Yeah.
300 and then maybe a free pass to Comic-Con.
Yeah, oh, that.
A one-day pass.
Yeah, that's actually so bad. See, now that's thinking outside the box. Yeah.
And then come and stay and refill our own coffers.
So we'll bring all of that back to you in the next. So that's panel process. So city budget. So at 10 o'clock this morning, there was a press event. The mayor announced his proposed budget for FY24. You may have seen in the UT, if you read the UT this morning, that there was $1 million for arts programming that included. But I'd like to dig into that just a little bit for you. And I'll offer to you all exactly what I said in executive committee this morning. After we get more specific, we'll send an email out to you all. Because there's a few questions, but I can tell you this morning. We received approval for April. So the draft budget includes $250,000 to launch our impact grant category. You may remember that's the grant category that City Council approved 2 years ago. That allows us to be very flexible. The impact category can change administratively. By that, I mean, the Memphis City Council is something that staff and the commission decide on each year. The idea of impact category is focuses on a city priority. So maybe world capital. It may be climate change. It may be border activities. This year, staff is recommending impact category launch with emphasis on our communities of concern and promise zone parts of the city. So that would allow us to focus the money exclusively on those districts. I'll pause on that.
Who's the communities of concern and promise to say,
Promise zone.
promise zone.
Yeah. So the honor with promise zone. Okay. So we have the largest promise zone in the United States. And they work in the states quite deeply. It is, think of the map. It's basically East Village, City Heights. A big. Okay, so Councilmember Rivera's district, Moyer would see downtown is East Village down to the Bay, then Barrio Logan, and then down to San Francisco. So more or less southeast, City Heights, Barrio, portion of downtown, and San Francisco. Obviously, the focus areas for the city in particular. We're here 10 years plus having shows that designated so that does not come with funding. Well, thank you. Yeah, it's not not prepared because I didn't know if I could announce this. Yeah, there's San Isidro here, so it does cover much of the southeast, waterfront as well. That does not come with federal funding, that allows us to do is track. It's the first time, yeah, on our funding program, being able to grasp the program. So we'll come back, at the May 1 meeting with details on that as part of the staff presentation. Super excited about that. $75,000 for conservation funds for cigar collection, $100,000 for cultural plan, both of those were expected. And then the mayor added in another $1 million for what is called arts program. I'm assuming that means OSP details because we need to come up with a form. So we'll find that out and communicate that to evolve. But that's the first entree. So pretty solid. I will say that the reason why we're not having the musical artist category that staff is proposing is because staff capacity. Creating one program, conceptualizing the program, as well as considering continuing to evolve the system. Right, it's just a lot. So we decided to that we have a board. Okay. Any questions on that before I jump into the presentation? Yeah. Yeah. That's easy to say. I mean, say though, is they do for us about a week before. This highest priority there is placed on the site is home services. Part of the reason why it's so high is because federal funds are continuing to reduce the COVID related funds continue to reduce. So we do some general fund, TOT, and some additional new state level funds. So that is by far the biggest priority after that funding. Climate action and development services. Just to expedite construction permits, since that's such a priority for all of us. So no surprises. Pretty standard budget, honestly.
So that compares to, did we get $1 million last year?
So last year, he brought up, city council approved pre-pandemic level of budget. So that's what we submitted. And then the mayor added $1 million on top of that.
Oh, got it, $1 million on top.
Yeah. So we're actually $1 million as regard to this school year.
$1 million on top. That's nice. Isn't that nice?
Except your chair is getting down. And, the chair does not. It's an 8% rise. So, our funding program is about $11.4 million. And $1 million on that is about an 8% increase. Inflation did not. So we're not quite keeping up.
Oh, it is kind of a downer. When you put it that way.
But it's better than being back and not getting it at all. Now we're at a 1% delta over inflation. Hey, that's better than a lot of industries are facing. So I'll take a 1% cut just by virtue of lumber costing a little bit more than I will us being even further, another 8% behind than we were. The one area as, wearing the two hats of policy funding and as chair of advocacy, the one area where I am disappointed, and I know Jonathan has not brought it up, but, I'll mention it, is that staff was not, added. We have requested staff members. And so decisions like,
Replace, what's the word, it's not added.
restore to where we were, because we've had levels, we had 2 additional levels.
Yeah.
And that the team is operating at 170% capacity, each one of them. It does give me great concern, and as we move forward, with talking about future fiscal years and future planning, I'm going to be beating the drum very, very hard on additional staff capacity. With city council members, anytime I'm given that opportunity, because I love that there's a cultural plan. I don't think there was anybody who was as vocally and, publicly, stupidly, in favor of a cultural plan as I would have been. But a plan is just a piece of paper that goes on a shelf. There's not a staff to make it happen. If there's not a team to execute on that plan. So I'm going to make it my, mission to get the city council and the mayor's office to understand that, agree with it, and put the bodies in place that are needed. So, so sorry to be Debbie Downer, but that's me. But I don't want to take away from the amazing news that we're getting $1 million more for arts programming. We're actually going to be able to do something with the impact category, and the cultural plan will be seen all the way through. And we've got money for conservation of the civic art collection, which is definitely needed. So, thank you to Jonathan, to Christine, to Bell, and the unsung hero of all those scheduling meetings. And the whole team for making sure that the case was made and money is coming to the door.
I did that with the clarification for that, the other is that promise on money, or that's still being worked out?
No, the promise zone money is 250,000.
Okay.
Um,
And it still hasn't been,
So the budget, and I'm going to make sure everybody was clear on that. So this is the initial budget, what was announced. So over the next month, then there will be ample discussion among council members and community members. And then a revised budget
well,
will be announced May 15th. Go to city council the 1st of June. So this kind of 6-week period is when there's ample time for members of boards, commissions, and anybody to talk to elected officials about any additions to the budget. And this is, there's usually, 10 to 12 million dollars on the table during this 6-week period that city council members tend to make decisions based on their personal priorities. Every city council member did in fact recommend getting money for the arts for the next couple of years. So it's very much on their mind. Obviously, the mayor has to prioritize issues. So there is this opportunity right now.
I'm really question what's going on with and everybody's council there, the rest of the city for this year. Just the, well, it's they're doing the one for the guy that, anyway. But, put it in, it's
I know, yeah, doing the one for Dr. Rebellis is,
that's what, that one is.
yeah, that's key for that. Nick was, a pillar. But, that's a good question. And, you know, funding is getting tight nationwide. I just got this, I've got a drastic appeal from Oregon Shakespeare Festival. In my email yesterday morning. It was, it's pretty harsh, actually, about the funding problems that they're facing. So, it's top of mind.
is,
making sure that we're getting dollars out there to those organizations that need it. That's where the, also the education on how to ask, what to ask for, and so forth. Okay, so
I will jump back
Yes.
to, after that update on budgets, I will, take us into the DPI overview. So just to frame this, this is something that this body asked for at the start of this November. Get an update on where we are with the DPI. Work, in particular, an update on the DPI audit that was presented to us in November 25 prior to the search. So this is gonna be super easy. Oh, God, Gabby, that's small.
all,
We made that bigger?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, that's better. All right.
Can you make it full screen?
no one on the panel is actually under our chair.
I mean, can you make it full screen so that the rest of the,
Oh, yeah.
If I make it full screen, it's actually smaller.
oh,
But
got it.
That works.
That's
Whatever.
probably reasonable.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm actually gonna move around and
There you go.
talk to you about all of it.
That's a good number.
under the age of 40?
Never mind.
My God.
So,
Want me to move up? You're fine. Ryan, fine.
Cheyenne, thank you. Okay, so just to frame it, this is the study. I did not print out a hard copy for everybody because it's your file, it's on the website. There are 58 recommendations in this study. So I'm going right back to the staff report that I presented April 16 of 2021 to this body. And I'm just going to give you an oral update of what we've accomplished since then. So we in January of 20, could have it even been fall of 19, fall of 19. We let an RFQ to lead the department and commission through equity training and to do an audit. There were 3 phases, and we hired 2 different consultants to work with us through this work. The first phase is the audit. I don't use that term inside City Hall because the term audit concerns people. The equity review was conducted, as I said, by San Diego-based RISE. The second one was conducted by Marjorie Johnson Reese and Associates based in Dallas. And then the third one we put on hold because of COVID. That was the community engagement. Really what we wanted to do is bring the community together in person and have a in-person conversation with the community about our equity work. COVID kept pushing it back, so we didn't get to that, but we have lots of successes that I want to share with you today. So recommendation 1 under phase 1, so this is the RISE report. Reform contracts to view city funding as a community investment and provide 80% of the contract award upfront. We've done that. So these are now awards. They are not contracts for services. That is a huge shift psychologically inside city legal and procurement. Christine led all of this work to get us to this place. That has allowed us to advance 80% upfront payments. So this, I think, is the most fundamental thing we've got accomplished thus far. Recommendation 2, and I'm going to ask you, I'm just going to move through. If you have questions, just stop me during the presentation.
Recommendation 2 is to re-envision funding criteria so that priority is given to organizations and events that are led by Black, Indigenous, and people of color, and or serve communities of color. Okay, so as we all know, Prop 209 limits the way that local government in the state of California can address, directly address all sorts of our legal discussions around communities of color. We cannot, in fact, direct money to BIPOC communities. You all know that. However, we can do things like direct money to the province zone, or to communities of concern. And we can ask and really push on engagements. And so that's what we've really done. We have proposed and received approval by City Council for these 2 new categories, individual artists and impact. Number 1, and then number 2, a hold number 2. We've been able to really focus in the OSP application in particular on the way that the organizations have been engaging in community. Recommendation 4, consider communities whose first language is not English, and design funding guidelines that respond in culturally appropriate ways. This area, we've also had some really good successes, and I'm going to ask Christine and Kip to give us some real basics on this. I also want to be sure that we are keeping in mind that this report came out right before we established our Office of Race and Equity. So at that time, the city had virtually no guidelines for the way that we could actually, for the way that we were directed to engage in communities whose first language is not English. As an example, even ADA, we had nothing. So we were, on one hand, we were out there in front of all the other departments. On the other hand, we were holding back a little bit because we wanted the Office of Race and Equity to give us citywide guidelines. Some of that has happened mostly in tandem. So I'm going to ask Kip and Christine, give us a, hold on. Give us an overview of how we're addressing Spanish, English, and other languages, and remind everybody of how we're handling technical assistance.
If I could ask a quick question, we'll move on to that on recommendation 3.
Sure.
A second. Would like the San Diego Black Arts and Culture District qualify as a community of concern or another body that funds can be directed towards, where we have the leeway necessary under Prop 209 to do so?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So if you think about communities of concern, it actually covers about 40% of the whole city. It goes up to Bobby Wolford's district. Campillo's district has some communities of concern. I don't think there's much along the waterfront, but excuse me. Oh, actually, the Convoy Cultural District is also an community of concern. So absolutely, we can direct and prioritize funds in those areas. In that category, can be designated to a positive. Yes.
Is do you have any sense as to whether or not in a 6-week period between now and the 15th that there's a chance for a little bit of advocacy to earmark some of these funds for some of those groups that we just talked about, like the Cultural District of Conway or Chicano Park or the Black Arts and Culture District?
So the way that that can work is Chicano Park is 501c3. Convoy is not. Black Arts and Culture District is. They can apply to the impact category. So it won't be direct funding to them, but they can apply to this funding, and then they'll be eligible in a way that downtown organization, for example, won't be eligible. Now, if you want to advocate more funding,
Yeah, that part too.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so recommendation 4,
Do you want to start off with?
Sure, we do offer our materials, translated into Spanish upon request. We did work with a service provider on technical assistance. We had, council district specific workshops and each of the council districts to anticipate, funding. Calls for that were quite related to the council district themselves, and often in multiple different languages. We had over 8 hours of technical assistance available this year with a vendor who did offer services in Spanish and English. Anecdotally, I think almost everything was in English, but we did offer that service to those who wanted.
Yeah, I'll just, maybe add that, we're looking at ways to, be able to provide translation interpretation for more than just Spanish. The city's still working on guidelines to that there are 8 threshold languages that are spoken in San Diego City. So we're looking at ways to be able to provide those options for people in the future.
basically, we're pushing. We still don't have really concrete guidelines on what is mandated. The city tends to leave it up to the council members, which is good in that the community can specifically ask. The problem is we are not mandated. So we don't necessarily have the tools to provide multiple language in the way that we would like to. So that's something when we bring this to you all on the 1st, the full commission meeting on the 1st, if you all want to make specific requests of us, then we have to respond to that.
Jonathan, just to clarify, we said having materials available in the 8 threshold languages as well as guidance. Not necessarily, or translation services available. Okay. And I'm it's not a fully formed thought yet, but with the World Design Capital being here, would it not be incumbent upon us to show that we are a city that is welcoming to a polyglot approach to civic engagement, and therefore having more translation services available, having more interpreters available shows that we're serious about being a world-based design capital.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yes, that's a good argument. And the other institutionalized tool is our Welcome San Diego plan that the city adopted about 4 or 5 years ago. That again is guidelines, it's not mandated, but we could certainly reference both of those, I'm sure.
And I can share that, our communications department is, now has translation services on contract. So there's new opportunities for us to facilitate the use of services to be able to offer their programs. So that's something we're looking into and how to do that. They're looking to San Diego County, who now has very clear mandates for their offices and departments, again, with the 8 threshold languages. So I think there are guidelines under development for the city in the future, but I think they're still in focus.
Okay. Anything else on that? Okay, recommendation 5, gather demographic data from applicants. As you know, we cannot, again, it's 209, we cannot mandate. They provide us the demographic data, but we encourage it, and almost across the board, it's or they comply. So we are now gathering demographic data for composition, staff composition, which is the key areas of trends that we're now gathering. I would just say quickly, fine line, we don't want to over gather information that we're not using. So those are the 2 spaces that we're actually gathering.
That's a good point. So what do you do with that demographic data when you get it?
Right now, it goes to the panel, they see the information, and that is part of their, can be part of their discussions when they're looking at the organization's overall.
When they're looking at, in the demographic data would be board composition,
And staff composition.
board and staff, not necessarily their clientele or their audience or who they're serving.
Of course,
Okay,
of course. We had already been gathering that.
okay,
We just hadn't been looking at the internal.
or board and staff, okay.
We did add a DEIA section to the OSP that we could see, here.
What does that mean? Whether or not they went through DEI training or?
Questions asked specifically about how organization programs contribute to decreasing disparities or advancing equitable outcomes. And so as we get to the ranks that you, approved earlier, those are a conversion from a score, and it's scored by section. And one of the sections was totally devoted to DEIA questions and outreach.
Okay, thank you so much for that.
Recommendation 6, permanently implement award caps. I believe that should be or redistribute to smaller organizations, particularly those led by serving BIPOC communities, must be reviewed by city legal and would necessitate changes to policy and guidelines. This is not an area that we have moved on for 3 reasons. One is because this audit came out during COVID. And so our budget was already cut in half. So administratively, we felt like everybody was doing something as something like that would be such a shift in the community that was already under such severe strain. Go back to January of 2021. That's number one. Number two, this will take a year to go through those changes because we are planning, we're drafting application guidelines from a year in advance. And then number three, we know that that needs to be a very public discussion with your input, but city council input. So nobody had the bandwidth, frankly, to deal with that in spring of 2021 at the city council level, and they were all granted. And then recommend, and I'm going to add a final one to this. We knew we were going into cultural planning. Cultural planning is going to give us the guidelines, the map forward, the path forward, and the opportunities to completely rethink the way that we're investing arts and cultural resources. Recommendation 7, award at least 50% to organizations led by and serving low-income communities. I'm thinking back to this. This would be a very difficult thing for us to do because it's TOT monies. However, through the cultural planning process, we can actually recommend different funding, a different funding source for a portion of our grants program. Most cities do that, whether they'll have a general fund or another source that allows the municipality to invest at a very deep community level that does not have to do with bed tax. So that's one way that it can happen. Another way is it's up here. Tools like our impact category. So if we had $7 million in the impact category, that's a really important tool. Not that I haven't said that 10 times already today. But that would be fantastic.
Again, very quickly, Jonathan, back to 6 and 7. Those have both stood out in my mind for a while. It's
Yeah.
really weighty and significant
I know.
issues that would have a far-reaching systemic impact. And I think the difficult things are exactly what we should be attempting to address. Do you have a sense or believe or maybe are confident that the cultural plan will provide a more effective vehicle to kind of actuate these two elements here without having to use these recommendations, but Trojan horse, backdoor, different platform altogether, but we might be able to do something that is even more meaningful than these two with less bureaucratic friction along the way.
We just have to make sure we have to pledge to ourselves that that's what we're gonna do. We just have to make sure, we have a mayor who's very, very, very supportive. So we need to make sure that that plan, which is ultimately presented by staff, with your endorsement, includes those recommendations. So that's when the discussions over the summer and then through the fall, that's when we and you all in particular have to really get to work. Once we start to have this concrete recommendations coming out of these conversations, then we just need to make sure, I'll tell you what happens sometimes with cultural plans is, really good ideas will be in that plan. As it goes, it gets approved by a chief executive, no reflection on Mr. Dargan, new chief operating officer. My experience in other cities, sometimes it gets stalled there. Sometimes it gets stalled in chief executive's office there, based on political decisions. So I don't anticipate that here, but this is where we just really have to shoulder it.
Can you clarify why it is that the one-on class cannot tap into the TOT money? You said that, did I understand you correctly? Where,
Low income communities?
yes. Maybe I didn't understand.
Award at least 50% to organizations led by and serving low income communities. This audit was looking at the existing categories.
Okay.
So they were looking only at OSP and CCSD.
Gotcha. Okay.
So what staff is saying is, those are really important categories. They're anchor categories. CCSD funds Pride. It funds lots of community-based festivals. So some of which are in low income areas and some of which are not, but they have a community-wide impact. So instead of reducing those two opportunities, why don't we have a larger portfolio of opportunities to make sure we're also investing in those low income neighborhoods, maybe in a way that's more responsive to those communities?
Yeah, thinking bringing in the way we do things in academia, I was just thinking, we now have this diversity officer, I don't know their title or, the job, but do they oversee any of this kind of work?
At the city?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, we talk to Kim Desmond and her team all the time.
because one of the things I'm thinking, it didn't happen in this round, but if there are applications that are rejected for these special communities, that they be reviewed by this person, because that's the way we usually do it in higher ed. So we have 50 applicants, and we reject an applicant that is a woman or a person of color or just from a different category. If it gets rejected, it automatically gets reviewed by a senior officer to make sure that it's legit. So it's just a way to sort of do a little bit of checking and overseeing. And I don't know if that's even possible in the city structure, but it's very effective.
Not for the grants category,
Yeah.
certainly for our vendors.
Okay. Yeah.
Feel free to weigh in here, Christine. What I would say honestly is this may surprise you, especially those of you who have lived here a while. We have self-corrected so far. I don't know if that's really an issue with us.
Okay.
as far as the vendor, contracts being dismissed in some way. Um, the problem is making making access to city opportunities more accessible. Kind of like once they're here, it's okay. Whereas you're saying inside the universities, sometimes they don't compete. It's lowering this threshold so that they can actually be inside the city system.
So that's the focus.
Yeah.
And I would also say that the income category is a way to get around the 209.
Exactly.
That's what you do nowadays,
Yeah,
you know,
exactly. That's why we're focusing on problem zone and communities.
gotcha, okay.
Also want to mention, it's very good, since you brought up the equity also, maybe Christina or John has more info on this, the equity fund, that they're gonna be probably also.
Yeah,
I think it's maybe $3 million or something, that's another FY 24 program. I have no idea if it's gonna have a connection to arts and culture or the guidelines could be. I would imagine that it might be amenable to some of those conversations in ways we can carry some of our arts and culture funding to the equity pot that they have, or maybe some of the advocacy that we can start to shoulder related to our programs. But also support sweeping and that in her pocket as well, so we can make more of those resources flow.
And what would that one be used for?
To the best of my knowledge, it's a grant program essentially that she's looking at, getting money into, they have to like rep organizations. I don't know if it goes down to the level of like individual folks doing things. I have none of that level of understanding, but I know that it exists and it's gonna be going on soon.
we had a conversation with Kim and her team earlier this week, specifically about that. We wanted to make sure they were aware of our impact category. Christine will be serving on the internal advisory committee to Kim's grant category. She's conceptualizing it right now with one of the schools at Berkeley. I don't know which school it is. Doesn't sound like there's gonna be a lot of overlap, because it is gonna be more like chambers of commerce and development agencies and that kind of thing. But I appreciate you saying that, because we're working really hard with economic development and race and equity to make sure that all of our work is at least in tandem. So we're on that today.
Thanks.
Okay, technical assistance. No, I'm sorry, recommendation, consider adding functionality to the existing Go Smart platform. Okay, that's super easy. What's the update on that?
We're bringing a new grant management system online, we're onboarding process, so we're planning to launch that for the FY 25 funding cycle. The reason we're bringing it on is because, so much of the current platform is meeting the needs that we have, both from an internal perspective for acceleration, but also from an user experience. It only includes applications, and then it's not really used part of the program. So we're developing a platform that will be accessible to users at every stage of the funding cycle. So the application receives, the panel evaluation, and also the award and contract management and file portal and one-stop shop and communications with the applicants or the awardees. So, they're not getting an email out to us, and we're doing our tracking off in a different system. So it's really going to create that functionality we need from a both internal and external perspective. So a lot of heavy lifting is going on in order to think about how we're going to do basically the onboarding and the building out of the system.
Least sexy stuff. I mean, but it's so important, but so not sexy,
Right?
right? Well, I didn't want to fluff it up. I mean, it's so important to have all those systems in one place. It's gonna make the staff feel like so much more efficient, and then the user experience so much better. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, yeah, and the funding team's heavily involved in that.
But this is the kind of stuff nobody appreciates. until.
Well, until you're grantee.
That, yeah, you're a grantee.
Yeah, yeah. Kip, are you gonna say it's not sexy?
Never.
Bring sexy back. Yeah, bring sexy back.
Okay, so. Oh, conduct fuller user interface study to better understand the applicant's experience, so we've done that. And that is resulting in the new software. And informally, I just want you all to know, informally, that happens a lot with staff across departments having conversations. And again, I'll go back to economic development, Office of Race and Equity, and our team are constantly communicating now about challenges, as well as just ways to informally or anecdotally improve access to the systems. Democratized online platforms such as Zoom, well, we've moved entirely to that. To your question, your earlier question, this is why we're doing panels entirely on Zoom, because it is access. Also, our technical assistance takes place on Saturdays now. I think many of you know our previous colleague, Leticia Gomez Franco, is our outside vendor for the second year in a row. She's fantastic because she knows it so deeply, number one. Number two, she's been on our side, she's been a grantee. And number three, she is fluent in multiple languages, so she can make the applicant feel very comfortable. But those, just to underscore, so our workshops are during the day, evenings, and weekends. So we're trying to be very responsive to the fact that people's lives are complicated. Implement language justice approach by making technical assistance available in multiple languages. We already talked about that. Could you go down one? I want to look at this detail. Bilingual speaker consistent. Okay, so we do not have one paid bilingual speaker in every workshop. We have a bilingual person who is working. We don't have a designated person. They can request it in advance, and then we have somebody who's bilingual conducting the workshops. Okay, recommendation 3, competition to panelists. We're doing that now, and we're nationally competitive, though on the low side. We get a C. We'd like to get to a B- this year. Embed a review process for panelists to see geographic reach of organizations. That is our mapping outreach, our outreach map, which we should be bringing to Gabby and Jay, maybe,
Yeah, TBD, but
hopefully May. Okay. Recommendation, increase virtual equity as a weighted score criteria. As Kip said, we have that category now as part of the scoring system. Okay, marketing and outreach. This happened in a time when we did not even have a social media presence. As some of you remember, we now have Instagram and Twitter. And I don't know, I'll say the mayor's office and city communications also got much better about it, including us in their communications plans. 17, invest in authentic relationships with communities of color and be accountable to their needs. You know, obviously this is large and vague, but incredibly important. We continue to be committed to that, something we have to do in partnership with you all. Can't be more specific than that, except that we really are committed to it. 18, deepen collaborations with internal city departments and commissions. We do all this. We make sure that staff with human relations, international affairs, gang preventions, parks, that all those staff members are disseminating our opportunities through their systems. Design and deliver culturally appropriate marketing materials. We talked about that. Now, this assessment also went into public art a bit. Can you take that up, Kip? Research and publish a 5-year historical dashboard. We have not done the dashboard. That is simply a matter of staff capacity, and in this case, it isn't necessarily staff would do it. We'd have to hire an outside vendor. Christine, are you at a place that you want to even consider that?
I think we'll have a look at our work plan for FY 24, but if it's for 5 years, you know, depends on how much of the dashboard. We certainly do some of the data collection, and I think we have started some of that data collection. I don't know if we'll be ready to visualize it, and we'll have to kind of look at our plan to confirm if we can actually deliver.
Here's what I can just tell you off the top of my head. So many of the pieces in our collection, if you're talking just about the collection, we do not have, we can identify anecdotally gender, but not race or culture. And we won't be able to without extensive research. We are collecting all of that information going forward, and we collect that information when we do RFPs for new commissions and acquisitions. As far as the public art, public sphere program, which is training program for local visual, well, not just visual, local artists to participate in the public art program. When are we doing round 2?
I'm hoping it's going to be fall, but it could be spring, but it'll be an effort to sure.
Terrific. Recruit BIPOC and mid-career artists to serve on public art review. We are doing that very intentionally. Council policy 03. I'm going to move through this stuff pretty quickly for those areas. You all know that we were successful in changes to 100-03 about almost 2 years ago now. First time in 17 years that allowed us to minimize many of the thresholds, but not all of them. Intentionally diversify the commission. Those recommendations gone to the Office of Boards and Commissions. And you all know very well this is very much about the leadership of the mayor's office. Our mayor is very committed to diversity and always on boards and commissions. And I hope that you feel like that's being reflected in this, the way that the commission is evolving. 25, create a community feedback mechanism to receive input on a slate of commissioners as they are appointed. That is not a mechanism that really works in the way that the Office of Boards and Commissions functions. If that's something you really are interested in, we can bring that back.
It's a little bit, I mean, there's an opportunity for feedback when appointments go to city council.
Yeah.
And are voted on, and you know, there's opportunity to give well, public comment and to go to your city council members prior to that. So I mean, there's a little bit of, there's already something in place.
Yeah, actually, that's a good point. Require an in-depth DEI training for all commissioners as part of onboarding. I will say, I don't believe it's in-depth DEI training, but you all did participate in some DEI training. Recommendation 27, create authentic points of connection between commissioners and the arts ecosystem. That is the point of having your engagement committee. So that is as robust as your engagement committee. Great. Okay, phase 2. You can take that up, Kip. Before I jump into phase 2, any comments about phase 1 at all? Okay. Phase 2 was, some of you were around for this when Margie Reese Johnson and her team did intensive training with staff and commissioners. And then after that, we had a second local consultant working with us. Christine, I can't remember the name of her firm. Diversity by Design. that was just to make sure that the commission in particular was prepared to have conversations. Fundamentals around use of language and basic concepts like gatekeeping, which is your primary tool, frankly. We have not continued that over the last 18 months. That really did end in 2021. Okay, additional staff recommendations based on phase 1 and phase 2. Adopt DI statement. You did that. For 2. Identify at least one qualified fiscal agent in each city council district. This is an area we're working really hard on. We do conduct an RFP process for fiscal agents every year. I do not believe we have a fiscal agent in every council district.
I'm not sure that's achievable, but, you know, we'll work on it.
But we continue to work on that. We have probably 8 pre-approved fiscal agents. 3, integrate DEI as a weighted scoring priority. We've done that. Revise Commission for Arts and Culture policies and procedures to include a minimum of these recommendations and an equity statement. I'm sorry, I'm going to defer this to you, Christine. I'm not sure what that means. An equity statement.
Was that a recommendation regarding the rules and regulations for the Commission for Arts and Culture?
Perhaps.
Basically, just integrate a statement within their document.
Okay, all right, so we have not changed policies and procedures. We have adopted the equity statement. We'll come back and look at that. Identify and consider additional funding categories for FY22. You all did that, which resulted in impact on individual artists. And then phase 3. This is what we have not done, and this really is about community-wide engagement. At that time, again, framing where we were in history at that point, there was a very specific recommendation that came from me that I wanted to invite RISE to convene conversations in what we informally know as Southeast, specifically around issues in African-American communities. None of this has happened formally because of COVID. So I think if you can go back to down to FY22, just a little bit up here, Kip. Funding panel review process. Oh, we should touch on this very quickly. This is where we actually provide DEI training for the panelists now. Go down, please. You all know this, that we informally work with CASA, the NAACP, Chicano Federation, et cetera, just getting the information out. This was a period of time when we used pretty traditional methods of getting the information out. We basically had to rely on the city because we didn't have our own resources. We didn't have social media, as an example. Oh, and we're recommending 3 non-arts fiscal agents sponsor artist-driven projects. Those have evolved. For example, CASA has been a fiscal agent for individual artists. Who else has Jacob Center sponsored individual artist projects? Catalyst, thank you, has so that is kind of organically just happening in the community now that they know it's possible. And then the 15-minute DEI training program. Kip, can you, I think this is it. Yeah, that's it. So that's an overview of where we are. So staff feels like we've done a pretty good job, some formally, some informally, with a couple obvious exceptions that are really substantive policy discussions amongst you all, but also with the city council. My question is, do you have, such many questions, do you have any requests of staff? We really have, we haven't done formal communication around this. Could, you know, most of that's gonna be baked into the June, July cultural planning conversations. So is there anything that you specifically want staff to address? If you feel like it has not been addressed. Formally.
You, so we get clarification on the policy and procedures, the revision of the policy and procedures, the language that you mentioned that is so amorphous. There's one, there's one that stood out to me, but generally considering the hurdles of a pandemic and so many different unknowns, a lot of really remarkable work has been done in a short amount of time. It's pretty where we started. A very large change.
You know, one thing that should just add, for those of you who are not on the commission when we did this, we also were very cognizant of the fact that we had absolutely business. Being out of the community saying that we telling the community what to do because we don't have time. So we will be very careful to be intentional in our commitment to what we need to do, but not to in any way try to conduct ourselves as a you're required our community was to encourage you to be better than we were. And we know that there's a lot of your we trying to be, I'm trying to be honest in our work. We're still not leaders. We do feel like we need contribution.
Reflection of, in my many years in San Diego, the way I see this place understood is neighborhood. And what I don't see is much dialogue between
neighborhoods.
yes, and so is it possible to create some incentive where there is like a project through the arts that would bring in a Southeast, Logan Heights, North Park, you know, I mean, because I find that as a crutch for this, for our city. I know we can really get thrilled about that when we put in the Kensington sign and all that. But, you know, like for example, I give you a really good example. We have Chicano Park, and then we have what's run by the port. They call it Cesar Chavez Park. And we've had a lot of conversation. How could we link those two parks together? And that's literally just a very close space, but through development, it's all been shut down. Or is there any way to link the whole park? You know, anyway, I just put that out there. I don't even know what that might look like. And I think that would be resistant, honestly, because I think people really like this neighborhood. Really big, the turf stuff. And the signs really kind of formal. You know, it's like, oh, this is, I live in North Park. It's solidified. Yeah. It's just really interesting. We don't have a lot of dialogue. Exactly, yeah.
You know, I will, in all of the discussions around cultural plan, the one thing that I keep hitting on is the silo nature of San Diego. I moved here 21 years ago, and the first thing that I really started to understand about the city was that it is so stratified between different districts, different neighborhoods, and so in every conversation around the plan, Jonathan certainly said this more times than I think he wants to, breaking those silos, breaking the provincial nature down and cross-pollinated between neighborhoods, between art forms, between arts organizations that serve those neighborhoods is, I think, the most important thing that we can do. Because there's a lot of also redundancy in the arts and culture community. There's a lot of, well, I serve this community and I do this. I serve this community and I do this through the same organization. You are mirrors of one another. You should be larger and combined. I am very much an arts yenta in that I want matchmaking and to force organizations, positions where they are not to encourage organizations to collaborate and to realize, oh, we could fit together. And then you're larger, you have a larger impact, our budget is up, and our funding opportunities are more diverse and more. So for me, I think that breaking down the silos is a massive, and something that I hope the cultural plan can address. That's been my my dream for a while.
Big hurdle, because breaking down those silos really means breaking down people's egos. Because at the very top, right, let's face it, yes, that's a great idea, but at the very top, the leadership, they want their own thing, right? Because we try to many times with half ours, and maybe that's part of the cultural plan, you know, is to bring leaders together to figure out how can we, you know, but it's very.
But then we can use the carrot stick funding, because we can say, okay, the leader who has no retirement plan wants to keep their organization captured in amber because it feeds their own ego and their pocketbook. We're not going to fund you anymore unless we see a satisfaction funding. For organizations where there's stratified leadership, where stratified leadership. What is your board set?
Talk about a bottleneck right there.
Yeah, and that, because that drives me, there's a reason I don't work in arts. Yeah. And it's because I was at a white work. Obviously, yeah, and the only thing I could do was move to Madison, Wisconsin. And I was up for the job of running the Madison, the Wisconsin, import stuff. And rather than do that, I left the arts. Because I wanted to be able to move up in my career. And I don't want that from the city. I don't want the brain drain from the next generation of leadership. The only way you can do that is by breaking down some of those egos. And the financial realities that a lot of arts organizations are run by people who devoted their entire careers to that and did not build up retirement.
I wouldn't want to change it. I would just simply want to bring it down. Because I think the uniqueness needs to remain. But how do you get them
It's a
to?
deaf hand, right?
Yeah, dialogue. And I wonder if any of this has to do with the fact that we're an international. It's a way to protect these, but yeah, we're doing this world event, and anyway.
Yeah, I think that's an understanding.
Two things, but both your thoughts, what you think of. One, I'm always in favor of bringing folks together to increase dialogue in certain senses. And I hear a lot about the siloization of every form of work, and I often remind myself that sometimes the silos are absolutely necessary, because there are people out there who I don't want to work with. Right? Like, there are people out there who shouldn't be doing the things that they're doing, but they're still there. There's no way to do it. There are people out there, especially on the art side, who are like directly responsible for harming people who are still working in these spaces. And there's little to no accountability. And I think it's even stranger on the art side, because so many more folks self-identify as progressive and more liberal. And there's the assumption that, like, we're the good guys. Not always the case, and there are just as many bad guys who are cloaked in this veneer of creativity and inclusion, but it's just not practically the case. So some of what Tyler was saying around the fiscal proposition within this and the extent to which certain silos and hierarchies can be defunded in sometimes quiet and sometimes overt ways, and what opportunities are there for different forms and models of community control, of ownership and decision making that can give people the space to feel good about their neighborhood and where they're at. But it doesn't have to be like, we don't talk to y'all, we can't work with y'all on this project. This is what we're doing. We want to see what y'all are doing. Maybe there are ways, I'm jumping around here a bit too. I've been going to the MCASD up in La Jolla a little bit more, it's new and it's there. And it's one of the museums I've ever seen in terms of the facility, the collection itself. But we can talk about it, you know what I mean? Like, it is what it is. What would it look like if San Diego were to have a Biennale type event that takes folks from neighborhoods who are working and creating and doing fantastic things? And if you live in LA is like the Southern California art hub, and San Diego is still a provincial backwater to a lot of sense. But it's not actually the case. You look at who's here and doing things on the ground, and I think the neighborhood separation, I don't use the word division. I don't know where you live, you just don't have to go to so many places. So it's really easy for someone to think that their organization is mightier than it is because they're operating in this really small bubble. And in that bubble, it's powerful. What would happen if there were a chance to get more of us together across these kind of artificial boundaries and showcase the things that people are doing and to leverage the physical institutions of culture that we have that don't belong to any, that shouldn't belong to any one person, where folks living and working as artists and creatives have a really difficult time seeing themselves in these places and spaces. That's not to say that, you know, MCASD should have a collection that's from everybody in the community year round. But geez, every 2 years, like, let's do something to interrupt that and to leverage some of these multiple streams of government, philanthropy, and corporate pieces to give San Diego and maybe even Tijuana, building on the World Design Capital kind of inertia that we're, you know, pushing uphill.
I love that.
To create like a destination type of thing and a large scale convening around arts and culture that reflects neighborhoods in different kind of ways.
So Jonathan, instead of the impact fund, can we have the interruption fund? I love that idea. You know, it doesn't have to be always, but you know, the idea of just like creating something completely new. You're not doing the same old, but really interrupting.
Like a platform.
Yeah.
There we go.
Like, you know, but the idea of
I love it. No, I
Like-
guess.
pride,
Yeah.
you know.
I'm writing that down.
Kamal came up with that.
Your our language.
Can I go back to the DEI thing? One thing, I don't see here when we talk about, like, every meeting, we start with like, here's our vision of the commission, and here's our mission statement. Where's our equity statement?
That's such a good.
Do you know what I'm saying? Like, if we want to censor equity, like, if I'm reading the mission statement and the purpose here, I don't see equity in here. And I feel like, you know, it starts from that.
Yeah, that's actually an excellent point. We don't acknowledge that, and we don't do event acknowledgements. I am not over, well, firstly, that is that terrain of the chair to the side. I have not overly first line acknowledgements because I think it's one of the feel sincere. We certainly can. Gosh, we should do that.
To, as part of, you know, policy and funding, it is our policy. So if we say, okay, we're going to develop an authentic brand acknowledgement that we as the commission use, talking about the citywide plans on which we fund organizations and organizations maybe this is something that we can provide the template for organizations to use in the future, as part of their own, acknowledgement for those organizations that do not already. And then the equity acknowledgement, the equity statement. Part of our own, vision, et cetera, that's actually directly in the city ordinance, isn't it? The language that we use is codified at the city level or is it at the commission? Commission. Okay, well then, as part of our policies, adding our diversity state for sure. And then it's on everything, and that's part of something certainly talk to the chair about, but as chair of policy funding, I would encourage us to move that direction.
Yeah, that's an easy conversation. Thank you for bringing that up.
I think that land acknowledgement works when there's some action coming to it. So like, you give, information on organizations and resources, or that we make a commitment to provide funding to. That may be against the 209 rule, but that we're committed to having a certain percentage of our dollars go to organizations, because they're all out there. So it's just
Also, the land side, those land acknowledgements, become almost omnipresent, and more of the native voices that we've been in communication with. The feedback we're getting is, if you're not going to give us money,
right.
as soon as you talk about where you're at, it almost becomes counterproductive. And it's like, yeah, we're on your stuff, but like, there's nothing for it. So like the action element that goes on with it, set aside something of this, I think is essential. So
Basically, what the guidance department said is, I don't want to suggest, or suggest to be informative that, I will say informally, three or four analysts who self-identify as individuals, they were all artists. I honestly don't know how, like, where they got the information about city on anything else. It was really exciting. They actually came forward by and identified us.
Mr. Chair, I think it's important for the new acknowledgement to be offered by, community nation as well. I agree. Yeah, that's what other institutions have done. Work with those communities.
If I remember that our board had a version of the land acknowledgement at the CCC meeting not long ago. Like putting two different things. Saturn is anytime we can go for it. It's that's a win in my book.
Just as we're looking at, especially doing the inventory of space and through the cultural plan, we're inventorying these. There an opportunity maybe as part of the, okay, so organization X, you're going to rent this theater that the city owns. A portion of that rental cost will then be distributed to a native organization as part of the land acknowledgement.
That's certainly something that can be brought into the conversations of the summer. Possible. Thank you for opening that door, though. I can see the work with the summer is addressing the city's own cultural facilities and how we can do that. Super exciting.
Oh, and just to Dr. Casino's point, just the siloed nature of this, now I don't know if it's on our list or talk, the organizations to talk to, but we should talk to Circulate San Diego and to the Metropolitan Transit System. Because part of the siloed nature of this, the city is physically getting to point A to point B. It's that transportation barriers exist. And so the more that we are talking about moving people to arts and cultural destinations and arts and culture to people.
We don't have a, excuse me, I'm just running through my mind the workshops that we're creating. I don't think we have a mobility workshop, but that's really important. Most cities have like a free arts mass for transit. Yeah, that's.
And the part of the problem is if you have it on get where you be.
And you take Charlie to the airport.
Yeah, and try to go to Florida to go see the new MCSD up there. How would you even do that? You wouldn't, you'd have to walk like 5 miles uphill a ways.
Well, we're not going to be able to solve every.
Yeah, I get it.
That's a long way. More and more. I'm just,
If we can get a free pass, we'll get a free pass on light rail, that's a pretty good
Hey,
step.
that's, you're right, that is a win, I'm sorry, that, you know, just, I mean, now. I'm complaining
Not to
about it.
diminish expectations before we get into the work, but it's a $350,000.
Okay, maybe we need a DeLorean and go back and found San Diego, this is what we're gonna do, guys. Well, I know we're a little over time, so is there anything more,
Nothing more from staff, if you have any follow-up, comments, questions, about any of this, reach out again.
There is, we didn't ask about conflicts of interest, or how this disseminate email to the commissioners.
And this is, if we are.
In relation to the whole.
so, if the, email that Kim had sent out, that, the form you're supposed to send to Gabrielle,
Yes.
if anybody is a, paid employee of any of those organizations, a unpaid advisor, volunteer, anything of that kind of nature, or any of our partners or spouses.
The only conflict I have is that I'm the founder of the Systemic Arts Movement, but I'm not paid and I'm not, you know.
We actually don't need the forms, we just need to do.
Okay.
But you always did, so just wanted to. I directed a 20-minute play for Trinity Theater.
No, wasn't very.
What year was it?
It's like a month ago, but it wasn't very good. I'm not a very good director, and they didn't pay me. So, good. I'm moving us along, were there any public comments on, staff reports or anything that has been said? Awesome. Great, we're gonna skip, no new business for future agendas? No, great. All right, thank you all very much. Have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you so much.